I meant to bring a book that went with the lesson today called The Martyr's Mirror. It's written in 1660. It's a historical book that went through the documentation of historical events and dealt with all the martyrs from the time of Christ up to 1660 for 17 centuries. What it showed was how governments will take and martyr people because of their beliefs. And it's called The Martyr's Mirror. It's basically the same book as Fox's Book of Martyrs, except for much more detail and much more information in it. If you've never read Fox's Book of Martyrs, I highly recommend that book. Now, I'm not going to recommend Martyr's Mirror because that is much more extensive reading. I mean, if you really want to get into it, that's the book you want to get. It's written by a different historian, but he goes into more detail and has it more documented than what Fox had. And I meant to bring that to read you some because that's going to go along with the lesson today, but it's still sitting on my desk. I forgot to grab it. Let's go to the Lord in prayer and get started here. Lord, I pray that you'll be with the services this morning. I pray that you'll take and bless them. I pray that you'll fill me with your Holy Spirit. Wash me in your precious blood. I pray that you'll take and give me the words to say this morning. And I pray that you'll take and bless the services. I pray that you'll have your way in the services. I pray that we'll be a correct beacon of light in these times to those around us. I pray that you'll always give us the right view on things, that we won't go too far one way or the other, but that we'll always glorify your name in the things that we do, the things that we say. And I pray that you'll bless the preaching and the teaching of your word. Bless the efforts to witness in your name. And in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Revelation chapter 17. Now, we took and stopped on verse 5 last week. It says that upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abomination of the earth. Take your Bible and turn to Isaiah chapter 57. Isaiah chapter 57. I want to give you one simple verse. Now, there are some chapters in the book of Ezekiel, and you have the book of Hosea that will describe this accusation or title, Mother of Harlots, in detail. And it'll go into detail on spiritual fornication and spiritual harlotry. And what that has to do is when God views the worshiping of idols, idolatry, He refers to it as spiritual fornication. And any religious system that promotes that, He refers to as a spiritual harlot. He even refers to Israel as being God the Father's bride in the book of Hosea. And he goes into detail of the way he looked at their idolatry as being the actions of a harlot. Now, I don't want to go into that in too much detail because, it's kind of uncomfortable, to be right honest. But the Bible gets pretty detailed on that stuff. I forget which chapter it is, but there's one chapter in Ezekiel, I'll tell you, it makes you turn red when you read it. And the Lord goes in so much detail on it. Isaiah chapter 57, if you look at Isaiah 57 and look at verse 3, I'll show you a passage to go along with this. Let's pick up verse 1. The righteous perish, and no man layeth it to heart, and merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. He shall enter into peace, they shall rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness. But draw near hither, ye sons of the sorceress, the seed of the adulterer and the whore. Against whom do ye support yourselves? Against whom make ye a wide mouth and draw out the tongue? Are ye not children of transgression, a seed of falsehood? Inflaming yourselves with what? Idols. Under every green tree, slaying the children in the valley under the cliffs of the rocks. So there's certain steps to idolatry. First of all, you are the children of a certain source. And they're referred to as children of adulterers and the children of a whore. Well, that's a spiritual application connected with idolatry. And then you wind up seeing the idolatry under every green tree. Now, you say, what is that? That's a mosque. And if you've ever been into a really heavy Catholic country that's controlled by Catholicism, you will see these groves set up with the statues of Mary where they come and they put their flowers, and that's everywhere. You find them all over the place where they come and they pray to the saints, or they'll have a grove for each saint, they'll have a grove for the statue of Mary, they'll have statues of Mary's, and they'll have these groves all over the place. And this is a form of idolatry. Now the second thing that shows up after that, when you get a country that is thick with idolatry, next you have the sacrificing of children. Now, you have that in the U.S. You have that in the U.S. You just don't recognize it. What it is an abortion. You have the sacrifice of children to abortion. And you have idolatry. The U.S. has been given to idolatry for many years. And there's idols all through the U.S. And what is that? It's images that people have made into gods, and they worship and serve more than the Lord. It's no wonder that the morality of the people have gone down. Now, we may not be as bad as some other countries. Now, after going to Europe and stuff, I will say America still is not as bad as other countries. There is a light in America, and there is a blessing on it that you do not see in other countries. And the thing is, you know what you still have in these other countries? Even in the communist countries, you have the idolatry that's there. The idolatry is there and it's thick. And most of it comes from Mystery Babylon, the great mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Why? Because she has committed her spiritual fornication with all the kings of the earth. And it's all through there. Now, this harlot is a religious identity, and she's being described here, verses 1 through 7, and then the interpretation is given through 8 through 18. So I'm going to just be very straightforward as to who it is, and then you can see the interpretation that it fits in the next chapter. This mother of harlots is going to be the Roman Catholic religion. That's what it's going to be. And the city that's being represented here, the mother of harlots, is the Vatican City. And this thing is clear. It's not something that you can have to guess about. It's pretty clear when you read it. The idolatry that's come out of that city and the blood that's been shed because of that city and because of the hierarchy and the Catholic religion through the ages is very clear. And that thing went from political Rome to a religious Rome, but it stayed political Rome. It just changed its colors a little bit. And it used religion to back up what it was doing. But it's still Rome. It's just as wicked as it was during the times of Nero and during the times of the apostles when they were feeding them to lions, and they were burning them, and they were executing them and putting them on racks then. They continued that practice even though they became religious through the Inquisition. And that's why I want to read you the details from that book. Now, here's a comment that I read in a commentary by Dr. Ruckman. In 1825, Pope Leo XII struck a medal with his own image on one side and a woman with a cup on the other side. It had written Sedet Super Universum, which is Latin for the whole world is her seat. He was a champion. The Roman Catholics refer to him as a champion of the Rosary. A champion of the Rosary. Now, the whole world is her seat. Now, look in verse 1. It says, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters." Now, let's read down through here and get the interpretation. Now, with that in mind, that the Roman Catholic Church is this great whore. It's a religious identity that's run from a very rich city. This religious identity is a political nation. The Vatican is a nation inside a nation. And that's why the Pope is part of the voice in the UN. And that's why the Pope is referred to as a political person. And he's one of the few religious leaders that is very political. He's a political leader. He's not just a religious leader. He is a politician. And it's a government. And is connected to that city. Now, let me read down through here. Verse 6. "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns." So the angel's going to explain this vision to John. So if you want the interpretation of it, you read the next part of the chapter. It gives it to you. This isn't something that's hidden. It's not something that's a real mystery. It's not something that's hard to understand. The angel explains it right here in the passage. All right? And what you want to notice is the things that are detailed interpretations. And then you can take and connect the dots, but he tells you a lot of stuff that you want to see. Now, verse 8, "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit." All right, we've gone into detail that he's going to be the Antichrist. That is the son of perdition coming up. That is the devil incarnated into the man. So that's who the beast is. Tells you right there who the beast is. We've studied that in detail already. You know who he is. All right. "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall descend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they shall dwell on the earth, shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not, and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth." All right, so what are the 7 heads? There are 7 mountains. Now, is that hard to understand? It's 7 mountains. Okay? So there are 7 mountains connected with this woman. Verse 10, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come." All right, so connected with this woman, there's 7 kings. 7 are fallen. This is the time of John. 1 is the time of John. So 7 had fallen before John. 1 is at the time of John. And the other is not yet come. One will be in the future. All right, so there's the 7 heads. And when he cometh, he must contain a short space. His time won't be very long. It'll be a short time, roughly 7 years. Basically, this is when his time's going to be. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7 and goeth into perdition. In other words, he comes out that 7th. And he goes into perdition. Obviously, he will be the Antichrist. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So the 10 horns are 10 kings in the tribulation time period that has power with the Antichrist. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So the 10 kings will take and fall at the second advent. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So the waters are all the peoples of the nations, of different tongues. That's what it is. It's the people of the earth. That one's going to match Isaiah 57:3. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So even though she rides on the beast, and she's connected with the beast, and the 10 horns are, the Antichrist will turn against her and burn her. Pardon me for being blunt and saying this, but when a man is a whoremonger, he takes a whore, he uses her, and then he gets rid of her. Right. There is no respect or love there. And that's why the illustration is used. Satan has no respect for Rome. He's using her, and then he'll get rid of her. That's basically it. All right? Burn her with fire. And for God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Now, ain't that interesting? Whose will is it? For God hath put it in their heart to fulfill his will. You know how many times I've told you Satan is nothing but God's pawn. There is nothing he can do that is not permissive power. He does it, but God allows him to do it. Why does God allow him to do it? Because he has a will to use Satan to punish the sins of the people of this earth who will voluntarily choose to reject him and love their sin. And Satan has always been God's pawn to give man the fruits of their sin. Now, that's a harsh truth. That is a harsh truth, but it's still true. There has nothing happened on this earth that God has not allowed in his sovereign power. You say sovereign? Yeah, I believe in the sovereignty of God. Not the way a Calvinist says it, but I do believe in the sovereignty of God, meaning God is all powerful and in control of everything. That's a harsh reality. And it's a harsh truth, because you see some of the things that's happened in this earth. You say, that's God's will? God allowed that? He used it to show you the fruits of sin. You know what man does have, though? He has a free will. He gets to choose the fruits of sin, then God gives him the fruits of sin, and he uses Satan to do that. Kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is what? That great city. Now, can you get any more straightforward than that? It is that great city. Well, what does that mean? It means it is that great city. It's a city that sits over many waters. And in verse 17, she commits fornication with the kings of the earth in verse 9. That's spiritual fornication with the kings of the earth. She has a golden cup. Her color is purple and scarlet. She's a political city, yet a religious city. And it sits on 7 mountains. Now, it's getting narrowed down here. There's only so many cities that can fit with this. And it's within view of a sea or oceans where they can watch from ships when she burns. All right, it's getting narrowed down here. Which one could this be? Istanbul? Well, that's on the Black Sea, but there's no 7. I flew over Istanbul. I landed in Istanbul when I went to Ukraine. And I looked on Istanbul when we took and left from the airport. There's no 7 mountains there. Well, where do you have this? Well, I'll tell you, there's one city that's in view of a sea, that's a political city, and it has a golden cup that it drinks from. And it's martyred the saints for years. And that's the Vatican of Rome. And when it burns, the smoke can be seen from the sea because it's not that far from the sea. You can take and argue with that all day long, but you look at the colors of the Roman Catholic Church with the bishops and stuff, and guess what? Purple and scarlet are colors. And the world has been made rich by her. There's a book that I would recommend you reading. It's called American Freedom and Catholic Power by Paul Blanchard. I used to have that book and I loaned it to somebody. I've never seen it again. I'd like to find a copy of that book again. I found that book in a thrift store. Now I bought it, but that is a recommended reading book that I would recommend you read. And what that thing shows is that a lot of these casinos and stuff, and a lot of all these, how the Vatican has so much money in the economics of the countries of this world. And the banks and the financial system, how the Catholic Church has its hands in that. And Vatican City is richer than any country in this world when it comes to the actual gold that it has. I'm not talking about a false note. I'm talking they are rich. That is the richest city on this earth, Vatican City. I don't think that book's in print anymore. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's out of print. When you read that book, and he's got all the documented evidence and stuff about what the Catholic Church owns, what they're behind, what they're financially supporting. And it goes into the finances of the Vatican City. Boy, is that thing an eye-opener. That thing opens your eyes to a lot of things. And you see chapter 17 and 18 all through that book. Another book to see the spiritual side of the roots of the spirit behind Rome is Hislop's Two Babylons. That's another great book. Hislop's Two Babylons. But that's going to be some boring and dry reading, but boy does it have some information in it and historical facts. And that's an old book. That goes into all your details of where Mary comes from and the Greek mythology and how the Roman Catholic traditions comes out of Greek mythology, and they just adapt the idolatry of Greek mythology and make it a Christian religion, and that's the ground root of the Roman Catholic Church. Hislop's Two Babylons shows you that book. So those are the two books if you really want to get your eyes open to this chapter 18, those are the two books I would recommend reading with Fox's Book of Martyrs. After you read those 3 books, you can read these 2 chapters, and it is as clear as it can be. as to who this is referring to. Somebody that does not want to see this has shut their eyes. They say, well, chapters 17 and 18 is hard to understand. That's because you closed your eyes to the truth. And you're not willing to look into history. Or you believe the rewritten history, which is what they try to do. They try to rewrite the history of this stuff. And it didn't end in 1660, the martyr of the saints. Don't you realize that Hitler was trained as a Jesuit? And most the people, his high-ranking generals, also were part of the Jesuit order. The Roman Catholic Pope blessed Hitler before he started his campaign. And then he changed his mind when he seen the tides of the war change. Why? Because the Catholic Church is a chameleon. It's just like any whore. She commits fornication with anyone that will pay her. You say, those are harsh words. That's the way the Bible describes them. I didn't pick them words. It's the way the Bible describes them. When you don't take and recognize the way God looks at something, you're looking at it from a candy-coated islands. Because you don't want to see the reality of it. That denomination is a wicked denomination. That thing is not spiritual. And here's the thing about it. You say, well, is everything that they do wicked? No. No. There's some things that they do that's correct. They go against abortion. Well, I'm for that. There's certain amounts of stuff that they do that is correct. But you know, Satan has never been a fool. You realize that when he deceives Eve, he gives 75% truth. And God ain't going to take and deceive. Satan's not going to deceive God's people by giving complete lies. He deceives them by giving them a certain amount of truth. He's deceptive. And that's why God's people are told to come out from among her. Now the interesting thing about that, in 1550 there was a man, I wish I could remember his name. He was up in Holland, and he was a sailor, and because he converted to the Anabaptist religion and denied water baptism from birth and was rebaptized. Anabaptists meant rebaptizers because they did not recognize the Catholicism water sprinkling of babies. And they believed when you got converted, that's when you got baptized. And they were called Anabaptists. Through time, Anna was dropped off and they were known as Baptist. And that is where the name Baptist comes from. Anabaptist was given to them by their enemies, which was the Roman Catholic Church, meaning rebaptizers. They were persecuted strongly through the time of the Inquisition. They were the ones that influenced Martin Luther, which caused the Great Reformation. Or the Protestant movement. You are not a Protestant. You are an Anabaptist. They were around long. You never came out of Catholicism in history. You never were part of it. True Christianity never was part of Catholicism. The true church never was. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody that was in Catholicism were lost. Some of them were saved. And when Martin Luther got a hold that of salvation was by grace through faith from an influence of an Anabaptist, he started the Reformation and he came out from among her and was separate. Why? Because he got saved. And that's your start of your Reformation or your Protestant movement. And they came out. All right, now that's a little bit of church history. Now this, in 1550, this guy, became an Anabaptist. So they take him, and about 3 years he makes it, and then they catch him because there was such a political movement from Rome throughout the nations to take and persecute this movement because they seen it was attacking their power. They were having him executed, and they burned that man at the stake. Why? Because he rejected infant baptism, and he rejected the Roman Catholic Church. So it was a political city that motivated the kings of the earth to persecute and murder anyone that went against her. That's what your Inquisition was about. And if you don't believe that, you need to take and go back and read the old books about it and see why they were put to death, why they were burned at the stake. It was for two reasons: because they rejected the political powers, or they rejected the religion of the political powers, which was Roman Catholicism. And back then, they had no problem burning you, beheading you, feeding you to the lions, or putting you on the rack. And you say, oh, they're okay today. They're civilized. No, they're just more tricky. And they're more subtle, and they're more behind the lines. And I'll tell you, if you found out where their finances are and who their finances are backing up right now, it would scare you to death. Because you'd see an agenda. And you know what? I don't even know that they know what the agenda is. Because their leader is a spiritual leader. And it's not the Holy Spirit. You say, do you believe in conspiracy theories? Sure. But all your conspiracy theorists has it wrong because they try to put it on men. That thing is satanic. And sure, there's one there. There's one there. It has an agenda. What is it? It's the great whore that's committed fornication with the kings of the earth. You know when our President Bush lost my respect? Was when he knelt down and kissed the Pope's hand. And I'm like, you know what? Conservative my foot. I mean, that guy's a fool. He was a fool. Why? Well, commit fornication for money and power. Money and power. Now, that's a little bit more truth than people can handle for a lifetime. Now, the 5 kings, 5 fallen. One is, let me give you 5 kings real quick. Now, this is a guess from those who have studied before me, but I think it's correct, so I'm going to give it to you. Your first 5 that are fallen are religious political leaders that were dominant world leaders who dominated the world. Number 1 would be Nimrod with Babylon. That would be your first king that was fallen. Your second one would be Pharaoh with Egypt. Your third one would be Sennacherib with Assyria. Your fourth one would be Cyrus, Persia. So each one represents the king that was over the nation that ruled the world. Okay. Your fourth one would be Alexander the Great with Greece. Your fifth one. And then the one that was at the time of John would be Caesar with Rome. Caesar with Rome. Okay, Rome was the dominant world power. And then that one is the one that goes into the seventh, will be the one that goes into perdition. That will be the Antichrist, which comes out of or is connected with Rome. He comes out of the seventh, and that will be your Antichrist. That's the one that, yeah, it is. So those are your 7 heads. Now, one thing I will say for sure that tells you is that the 7th will be the Antichrist. And that one will be because he's the one that was the son of perdition, that is and will come out of the 7th. So that's going to be your 7th one. Then you have 10 kings. 10 kings that will reign for 1 hour with the beast. So in the second half of the tribulation, there will be 10 kings that will give their power to the beast, that will rule the world with the beast. And when they get their power, when the Antichrist sets up his power and sits down on the throne, he's going to, somewhere in that time period, burn Vatican and reject them. He'll use them as a pawn, then he'll burn it. And he'll become his own identity. Now, and that probably will happen somewhere shortly after the beginning of the second half, when he sits down, he says that he's gone. Now, here's the interesting thing that I got thinking about this thing. Look at verse 11. And we'll get into chapter 18 next week, but let me end with this, verse 11. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Now, I don't know exactly how to explain is of the 8th and is of the 7th and is the 8th. But it's interesting to me that he is the 8th. Like, you know what? Who would be the illustration of that? Because through history, God gives you illustrations. And you know who came to my mind? It was Henry VIII came to my mind. Now, what did Henry VIII do? Henry VIII was connected with Rome. And then he gets upset at Rome, and he rebels against Rome and sets up his own hierarchy and his own religion, the Church of England. And he says he will not subject himself under the Pope because he got mad at the Pope. Now, ain't that a great illustration of the exact same thing that the Antichrist will do in this chapter? She's riding on the beast. The beast is connected with her. And then the 10 kings that has federation hates her and burns her and punishes her. And the man that's the best illustration of that in history was Henry VIII. To me, it struck me when I was reading that. I was like, you know what? Now, I'm not saying Henry VIII is the 8th one. I'm not saying it. I'm saying he's a type. He's a type. That's something I'd like to take and study Henry VIII a little bit more in that light of him being a type of the 8th. All right, let's end there, and we'll pick up chapter 18 next week.